Welcome to Great Loop Radio, brought to you by America's Great Loop Cruisers Association. We're dedicated to sharing Great Loop information and inspiration with those actively cruising, planning for, or dreaming about a Great Loop adventure. I'm Kim Russo. I'm the director of AGLCA. Today, we're going to once again continue our series on how we found our Great Loop boat. This has been an interesting topic for a lot of people since it's a challenging market right now to find a boat for the Great Loop. So today we are going to talk to Ian and Trina, who have had their boat for some time and are in progress on the Great Loop. So we'll find out a little bit more about how they found their boat. Before I bring them into the conversation, I want to take a moment to recognize and thank our Admiral sponsors who support AGLCA at the highest level. They are Curtis Stokes and Associates, Passage Maker Trawler Fest, Skipper Bob Publications, and Waterway Guide Media. As always, we encourage our listeners to support these businesses that support the Great Loop. And I would like to go ahead and officially welcome Ian and Trina. Thanks for joining me today.
Hello.
Hi, our pleasure.
And Ian and Trina we're thrilled to have you here. Ian and Trina are coming to us from Signal Mountain, Tennessee, and they keep their boat there in Chattanooga. So start off, tell us a little bit about yourselves and your Great Loop so far.
You go ahead.
We've owned the boat for about 8 years now and have only done half the loop. We bought the boat when I was on a retirement job in Pennsylvania. We were living in two places at the same time, Signal Mountain and Pennsylvania. So since I was working up there, it was much easier to have the boat up close to where I was so we could get it ready for the loop. And my intention was to do the loop once I retired. And Trina was kind enough to go along with that.
Mm-hmm. And so you've only done part of the loop so far. So tell us a little bit about that. What parts have you done? And, kind of how have you been planning that out in that you're doing, I suppose, a little bit at a time over a longer period of time. And there's more and more people contemplating that kind of segments idea for the loop. So tell us a little bit more about what you've done and how you've done it so far.
I guess for us, it was the choice was dictated by outside considerations. First of all, I wasn't going to start the loop until I retired, which was in 2018. And then we had to get the boat basically from the Chesapeake, where we had kept it for about 4 years while I was working in Pennsylvania, to Chattanooga. And the obvious way to do that was to do the northern half of the loop, go the conventional way that everyone else goes, counterclockwise. And we started that and got it to Chattanooga in 2018. And since then, we have been continuing upgrades on the boat, pretty significant upgrades. And of course, we've been sort of homebound with COVID. Then Trina had some foot surgery this year that she's just about over. So we're thinking we'll be able to resume the southern half of the loop in October this year, hopefully.
Mm-hmm. And so what are your plans? You'll cross your wake then on the Chesapeake. Will you bring the boat all the way back home to Chattanooga, or what's the plan once you finish the loop?
Well, there's so much I want to see. It was a quick trip to bring the boat from the Chesapeake to Chattanooga. It was more like a delivery mission, so we didn't get a chance to see all the gorgeous things that you can see. So, my hope is to, after we finish the Chesapeake, then maybe take it up northeast, maybe into Canada, and make it a slow trip to really enjoy the trip. I mean, the Great Loop is like a road map where it stops at gorgeous places. So that's what my hope is.
I think we had like around 40 travel days to get from the Chesapeake to Chattanooga. So we were really steaming, and that with that spread over a period of about 2.5 months because of weather delays and just we wanted to stop a couple of places and just catch our breath. But Trina's right that when we resume the loop, we're going to take it as it should be done, which is a day at a time and slow.
Yeah, lots to see and do. So I'm glad that you have the opportunity to go back through those northern portions of the route and take your time and see all the things that you'd like to see. So you mentioned you've had this boat for about 8 years now. Did you have any boats previous to this one?
Several, yeah. So my father, when I lived in Cincinnati as a kid, we had a cabin cruiser on the Ohio River. He had runabouts. As soon as we got married, we bought a canoe. Turned out that wasn't for us because we couldn't paddle in a coordinated way. We ended up doing S-curves all over the lake. But since then, we've had sailboats, power boats. We raced Flying Scots, and we raced a Cal 28 for many years. And just pretty much everybody I know has a boat. So I've been on boats most of my life. I'll let Trina speak about her boating experience.
Well, my boating experience was so much more limited. Basically, my parents they were living in Charleston, South Carolina, and they told us about renting a bateau. This was back in the 30s, and in Shem Creek, and how they would fish. And so they had a farm in Alabama with a huge pond on it. So they bought a bateau for the pond. And so that was my experience until I met Ian, who was a boat enthusiast. And it was just all from there.
Yeah. So let's end the suspense. Tell everyone what boat you do have that you're using for your Great Loop and why you chose that boat.
Sure. It's a DeFever 44. We've had it for about going on 8 years, about 7.5 years. And we chose it after looking at a lot of other boats and comparing it with those boats. And it just was it checked all the boxes for us. We looked at a 30, I'm not going to mention brands because I don't want to prejudice anyone against anybody else's, any other brand of boat. We looked at a 36-foot trawler. We looked at a 42-foot trawler. And both of those, I had convinced myself based on just paper research or online research that those were the boats for us. And if I have one lesson in all of this for me, it is not to make your mind up or become emotionally attached to something that you have just read about without actually seeing it. Because once we saw the 36-foot boat, it was really small.
It was small.
The 42 we chartered, and we went on several of those. Actually, friends took us out and things like that. And we chartered one out of Fort Myers. And the problem with it was the Pullman Birth. And there were no Walker or Island Queens available in that model. So
basically, I told Ian I wasn't going to get on the boat without a queen walk around.
So for people who maybe aren't familiar with the Pullman Birth, explain what that is and why that was a non-starter for you.
Well, that means the smaller person, I guess it's on an angle. The smaller person gets against the wall, and the taller person here gets, where you step down. So that would mean that I would crawl over Ian's knees and drop, it seemed to me, about 3 feet if I had to go to the ladies' room at night. And so I thought, I think that's for me. I don't think I can do that.
And I think that's something that perhaps having boating experience made you realize that. But I've talked to people who really didn't realize for people in our age group that climbing over one person, it's the equivalent to a home having the bed against the wall and having to climb over the other person to get out. And I think that's something that some people don't necessarily think through if they emotionally become attached to a boat before they really think through what's it going to be like to live aboard this boat. So for you and for many, kind of having that island set up, queen or better, is kind of a bonus. So it's great that you had the opportunity to go on board a lot of those boats right now, because there's such low inventory on boats for sale. It's much more challenging for people to have that experience of walking aboard many boats. One of the reasons we're thrilled to be back to in-person rendezvous where we can have some looper crawls is that people can get that experience of checking out lots of the looper boats from Looper Boats in Progress. And I think Ian, you attended some rendezvous and had that experience of being able to go on the looper crawls. But it sounds like you kind of focused on trawlers of different sizes. What is it about trawlers that attracted you?
Me, it's the use of space, particularly Art DeFever's designs. You have so much usable space indoors and out. The flybridge is enormous. The sun deck is really large. You can have 6, 8 people out there with no problem. Probably another 6 or 8 up on the sun deck. Not that we host a whole lot of parties, but you know, it's just nice to be able to stretch out like that. Indoors, likewise, he made the maximum use of space. There's a nice roomy saloon. I like the speed of a trawler. I don't, you know, we had go fast boats before, and there's just a whole lot more to boating than just turning a key and getting there as quickly as possible for me. So, and then the economics of a trawler made sense also. It's just a lot more fuel efficient and easy on the pocketbook when you are traveling.
So,
and I like the almost a shrimp boat line. Love that high prow. And those are just beautiful classic lines.
Lots of character in those boats. That's one of the things I like about them too. So we talked about the walk around Queen. What were some of the other must-have features that you, as you started to narrow down your boat search?
You want to go first?
Well, I was so new to this type of boating, and Ian had been doing a lot of research, and I could tell that it was coming our way. When Ian starts researching something, we're going to move in that direction. It's like the Mississippi's going to go. So I would say, what were we talking about? Must-haves?
Yeah.
I want it to be homey. If we were going to travel, I wanted to be as comfortable as it could be. And so I liked the galley up. And I like that the DeFever has kind of an open floor plan, so to speak. It's really maybe 3 rooms, the forward berth and this huge, you know, for us, saloon. And the galley is right there. And then it's the back berth. And so it gives you just a lot of comfortable space. It's not broken up very much. So that was one of my things.
And for me, I think I wanted twin engines, fuel sipping engines. I wanted them to be naturally aspirated, meaning that they don't have turbos on them or any high-tech electronics on them. Those are the easiest to maintain and very, very reliable. The Ford Leymans that we ended up with, many people say they're good for 20,000 hours, which means several lifetimes of cruising. Let's see, we wanted flybridge and lower helms, so twin helms. I wanted full or near full displacement, meaning that the boat sits deep in the water rather than riding on top of the water when you're under power. That's the most economical way that, to travel in one of these boats. We wanted an aft berth rather than the master cabin being in the forepeak. We wanted it in the aft section of the boat. And this boat has a cavernous aft berth. And 2 heads. Let's see what else.
Walk-in shower. That's nice.
We wanted a walk-in shower.
Ian doesn't bump his head. He can walk straight in.
And then I wanted a boat that was not extensively modernized. I wanted a boat that was kept pretty much as it had been, so that any modernization would be mine and not somebody else's idea of an upgraded trawler. I like to keep the traditional feel of the classic boat, but also have the modern amenities in it, and that's what we've really focused on.
So that's kind of your list of the must-have and the nice-to-have features. Yep. Does the DeFever 44 have all of those things, or did you have to compromise on some of them?
Well, there was a list also of nice-to-have features, and those included like a pilot house and a cockpit. The walk-in shower was either a must-have or a nice-to-have. We wanted a lot of storage, and we got everything we wanted except the pilot house and the cockpit.
The cockpit, we thought we wouldn't need, you know, that, and of course, I don't know all of the boating, where it's what about, isn't there a 44 plus 5?
Yes.
I think that's it. So we looked at that and thought, well, we can fish off of the whatever.
Off the sun deck.
But it would have been very nice to have that cockpit. It's just that extra room would have been really, really nice to have. But, that was, we just didn't think about it at the time.
That's probably the only regret, and it's not a big one because we can fish off, we could fish off the transom of the sun deck, but we have added a transom mounted dinghy down it recently. So fishing off the transom, even if we had done that with a cockpit, probably wouldn't have worked.
Right.
Well, we'll have to get in the dinghy and go fishing.
There you go.
There you go. That works too. One of the things that you mentioned was important to you was the aft cabin, and you have that in your DeFever.
Right.
Tell us why that was something that was important to you.
Well, for one thing, it's the only way to get the full beam of the boat in the that I know of, unless there are DeFevers and other boats that have midship cabins. But in a boat the size of a 44, you're pretty much left with having a forward master cabin or an aft master cabin. Mm-hmm. By virtue of being aft, you get the full 15-foot beam back there. So it's, like I said, it's cavernous. It's really large. And secondly, you're not listening to the anchor chain moving at night. You're not listening to the gurgle of water hitting the bow if you're in a current, that sort of thing. So it's just a much better arrangement for us.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about how you went about finding your DeFever 44. Let's take a quick break and play a message from one of our sponsors. And when we come back, we'll talk in depth about how you found the boat. So we'll be back in a moment. Schwartz & Company Yacht Sales is a boutique yacht sales organization and a proud supporter of AGLCA, loopers, and adventurous souls throughout the Great Lakes. We are the exclusive representative for American Tug throughout the Great Lakes region, including the Canadian provinces of Ontario and Quebec. We are very active in the yacht brokerage market on both the buy side and sell side, providing our guidance and resources to valued customers. We also work with shipbuilders both in the U.S. and abroad to bring our customers' unique dreams to life. We welcome the opportunity to earn your business. We're back on Great Loop Radio. My guests today are Ian and Trina, and we are talking about how they found their DeFever 44 for the Great Loop. So kind of fill us in on how that process worked for you. Did you narrow down to a DeFever 44 and went searching for that specific boat, or was the search, the earnest search when you really were looking for one to purchase, was it more widespread than that?
I think we decided on a DeFever 44 when we went to Beaufort, South Carolina, and saw one for the first time, and were actually able to go aboard. Mm-hmm. And from that point on, I think we pretty well solidified that as the model we were after. Problem was there weren't many, it's like a little bit like now, there just were not many on the market. Uh-huh. So we went to...
Can I interrupt?
Absolutely.
Before we saw that DeFever 44, we were looking at all sorts of boats. I don't think there was a dock that we didn't walk on that happened to be there. So we looked for a long time, it seemed, and looked at a lot of different boats at the rendezvous, and then narrowed it down. That's what I remember.
And once we selected or settled on a DeFever 44, the trick was finding one for sale. So one came up on the market while we were in Italy, and there was no way for me to go and actually see the boat here. So I called a friend, Don Moon, on the Trawler Forum, who coincidentally had built the first house that we had bought on Signal Mountain years before. And he was so helpful. He knew a guy in Jacksonville who was a commercial captain and a real boat nut who was willing to go down to Palm Coast where the boat was located, was actually for sale. And Jack went down and looked at it and called me in Italy and said, yeah, this is a boat worth going after. So I started doing homework and missed a lot of Italy in the process. You want to interject?
Oh my gosh. He was so focused on researching this boat that we were in Florence looking at all this artwork, these palaces. I have a picture somewhere of Ian in the corner in the back with his head buried in his computer. Look at and look at that. Just a minute, Trina, just a minute. So that's that helped, I'd say.
Well, my
research a little bit.
My thought was Italy will be there for another visit. But this boat wasn't going to be. So I talked to insurers. I talked to other boaters about this kind of boat, and finally I called Curtis Stokes, who was the seller's broker, and we had a conversation. Asked him if Jack could go down and take a look at it. He was totally cooperative and helpful with that. When Jack reassured me that the boat was worth consideration, we made an offer on it. And I hit send literally as the wheels were coming up on the plane as we were flying out of Rome. So it was a contingent offer, of course, based on a survey. And that basically gave us first refusal on the boat when we were finally able to actually physically see the boat.
Right.
And we went down and looked at it in Palm Coast a couple of weeks later, had the survey done, engine and hull survey done by
Bill Gladding.
Bill Gladding.
He was wonderful.
Super surveyor. And it came back really clean, really in good shape. And we just negotiated the final price, and now we own it.
And I love that you shared the story about Italy, in part because the fact that you weren't there and able to get to the boat quickly to look at it is a lot the way things are working today, with the market being so tight and boats coming up, being listed and getting offers almost immediately. So it's nice to hear that you did make a contingent offer before you saw it, and that was a comfortable process for you, because I think that's something that's giving people a little bit of heartburn right now, is the idea of putting some money down on something they haven't seen yet. But right now, that's just kind of the nature of the beast with the way the market is. So 7 years ago, I think it was probably a little bit different, but because of the boat you were after, it was a little bit more like we're hearing things are going today. So it's great to hear that. Did you have any concerns with going to the seller's broker without having somebody representing you specifically, or did Curtis fill kind of a dual role there?
Curtis clearly represented the seller in the transaction, but I can't say enough good things about him as far as being fair and upfront and straight with us when we were asked questions about the boat. Everything he said about the boat, and he didn't hype it. Everything he said about the boat turned out to be accurate, and he made the process a lot easier.
And
I did
Jill
not.
was wonderful.
And Jill was great. Yeah.
Goodness. Those are more fabulous.
So I didn't really consider a seller's broker at the time. I gave passing consideration to it, is the best way to put it, but I felt comfortable enough with Curtis that he was not pressuring me to buy a boat that I didn't want. And ultimately, I didn't think that the seller's broker was going to, for me, add a great deal of value at that time. Now, if it were another seller's broker involved, then a buyer's broker for me might have made sense.
So tell us a little bit more about, the search itself, since you were basically doing the searching on your own without a broker. You've mentioned that you went to lots of docks and looked at boats, but I assume that actually looking for the DeFever was primarily an internet-based search. And did you limit geographically to where you would find the boat?
Yes.
Yeah, east of the Mississippi for us. So we looked on the East Coast. We looked in Florida. Internet searches, like I say, pretty much confined to the eastern United States, but physically going and looking at boats, it was up and down the East Coast in Florida primarily.
Quite a few places. There were beautiful boats on the West Coast at that time, but the logistics of if we found the boat we wanted, getting it back up to the Tennessee mountains was going to be was difficult. But we did do you were on the internet all the time. I'm recalling this now, and I got all involved too. We just look at these pages and pages of boats and checking them out, and then deciding what we could call about and where we could go to see them.
Yeah, so copious research.
Yep.
Going to rendezvous. And people
And
were
boat
very welcome at rendezvous and boat shows, trawler fests.
Yep.
Going to look at boats were actually for sale, the few that we could find. asking people if we could see their boats, and sometimes or talk to them about their boats. And some of them were kind enough to just say, yeah, come on down. We'll even take you out. That was really a help.
Yeah.
Um,
Boaters are
and
wonderful with things like that. Everybody loves to show off their boat, but they're also so willing to help someone who's in that process and trying to figure out what the right boat for them is.
Mhm.
that's really true.
Mhm.
And then chartering. We chartered a boat in Fort Myers and for a week and had a great time with that. And just, general obsessiveness.
Yeah. So throughout that process, kind of what's the piece of advice or the lesson learned that you would want to share with someone who's working on this idea right now of how they're going to find their great loop boat?
Well, I would say see as many boats and boat types as you possibly can in person, if possible, or as early as possible in your search. Don't emotionally commit to a specific brand or model of a boat until you actually set foot on one. It's fine to make an offer on one if it's contingent and you have that full understanding, and everybody understands that it's a contingent offer and you can walk away from it at any time. So it seems like conflicting advice. Move quickly to get the boat you want, but don't emotionally commit to a boat that you think you want until you've actually set foot on it. That would be my suggestion.
And take your time. I mean, and I think, I understand that it's a tight market right now, but to really get an idea of what you would like, that process of elimination, and the forum is wonderful. There's so much helpful advice, so much information, and people are great.
Helpful people.
Great
Exactly.
people, and so willing to impart their experience and the pros and cons.
That's great advice. And I love the idea of trying not to become emotionally attached and taking your time. And I think in this market in particular, everyone feels like they have to move fast. And you do, but at the same time, I've seen some potential loopers seriously considering boats that in a different market they would absolutely not consider, or at the price point that they're looking at paying for it because it's such a seller's market. If the market changes, they make face taking a big loss on that boat. And for some people, that's a comfortable idea. Hey, I love when we have the pets join us. Hi. But so yeah, it's I think that's great advice, particularly in today's market, as people are looking, finding challenges with the lack of inventory, and then potentially looking at settling for something. And we encourage people to take their time, make sure it's the right boat for them. So that's wonderful advice. As we wrap up, one thing I neglected to ask you, I think, is what did you name the boat?
Oh, Stella Maris. That was the name of our previous sailboat as well. And we named it after this. Trina's family is from Charleston, South Carolina. We've gone to Charleston every year since we've been married, which is a long time. Hard to believe. But there's a little church on Sullivan's Island down there named Stella Maris that just always looks so pretty to us, and we thought it was a great name. So that's been
Looks
the name of
out
our
to
boat.
the harbor.
Star of the Sea.
Yeah, beautiful area that you're talking about. It's my home, and I love the Charleston area. And a great name for a boat. So Trina and Ian, thank you so much for sharing how you found Stella Maris, and we've enjoyed chatting with you. Hopefully we'll see you again on the water.
Our
Thanks
pleasure.
for having us.
Thanks for doing this, Kim.
Bye.
And thanks to everyone who's joined us today. We hope you've enjoyed this episode. We'll be back next week with another episode of Great Loop Radio. Until then, safe cruising.